The preparers. In the early 20th century, the next phase began. Those who were preparing Earth for first contact had set in motion events the moment nuclear fission was signaled to have been discovered on the planet. That was Phase 1. Always on other planets inhabited by humans, that moment precipitated self-destruction. Humans on planet Earth wondered why, after all this time of their own existence, no other intelligent life in the universe had revealed itself. What they did not know was that on every other similar planet, the moment nuclear weapons had been developed, they had destroyed themselves. Anticipating this, and the subsequent now well-documented stages to destruction following, the preparers enabled some Earth humans to discover the technology required to network populations digitally, the Internet. Other human civilizations on planets other than Earth had also been gifted this knowledge, but it had never been utilized in time to stop self-destruction. With Earth, however, the preparers had seen a difference. Despite several moments on the precipice, Earth's inhabitants had not destroyed themselves as quickly as others had. There was a chance that Earth might be the exception. Phase 2 of a new preparation strategy was developed. The preparers had been monitoring and studying events on Earth more closely once self-destruction did not happen within the normal 50 years after nuclear discovery. Waiting for the right moment to activate the plan, they saw an opportunity at the end of the 21st century's second decade in Earth humanity's current calendar. As the two great superpowers of the time, the USA and China, entered a trade war initiated by the demagogue leader of the US, the preparers deployed the virus. As a cover for their actions, the virus would begin in collectively inclined China. The Chinese would discover this and declare it a natural phenomena. As no other humans on Earth alive at that time had experienced a pandemic in their lifetime, no one would be any the wiser. Despite the expected demagogic protestations by the US over the truth of origination, due to the now fully networked nature of Earth's population, state opinion was overridden. The older generations of current humanity on Earth who occupied the positions of power all over the planet had been much slower to accept the digital evolution. Unable to conceive of how the Internet had connected the younger generations like never before, they continued with the same strategic plays they had always used. Initially, China quarantined the area where the virus outbreak occurred. When the virus spread to Italy, it took some time for this less collectively inclined nation to react. But when they did, due to health concerns of the population now having a mouthpiece through the Internet, the Italian government were forced to shut the whole country down. While most countries followed the advice of the World Health Organization at this point, and also quarantined their populations, the US and the UK did not. Both the US and the UK were being monitored by the preparers more closely before the virus due to what was conceived as an extreme and dangerous form of capitalism taking control within them. An unexpected side effect of networking these nations early in the process was that dangerous elements had figured out uses for the technology too quickly. This spilled over a few years before the virus, with right-wing fascist governments taking power in the US and UK. Both countries' darker sides had now learned from the 20th century folly of Nazi Germany being too overt in its more violent intentions, and now forwarded as morally a good a presentation of themselves as they could to their populations while, in reality, behaving in the opposite way. A key component in transferring their populations to their own quota was the belief in an ideology known as everything economics. This ideology had it that if anything could not be broken down into a format understandable and explainable by economic theory, it was useless and should be destroyed. Hence, in the UK, there was a period of avoidable austerity, a slow violence, which killed thousands of the weak, vulnerable and elderly. This austerity had followed the first large economic depression of the 20th century. Caused by rampant greed, selfishness and a short-term outlook as a result of the 9/11 event, the banking sector had started living like today was always potentially their last. When it turned out that the next day and the next day after that continued to happen, the all-or-nothing short-term economic gains they made at the cost of others become visible. An economic crash occurred and the banking sector was essentially destroyed. However, instead of governments doing anything differently, they simply used taxpayers' money to reopen these institutions and let them carry on as before, this time safe in the knowledge there would always be a safety net no matter how wrong their actions became. Bankers, money and economics had become God. With this false God in place, one insistent on the exploitation, profit and greed, these values circulated and embedded themselves amongst the US and UK populations. Criminals, gangsters, corporations and government converged. As the virus began to circulate, Countries which were affected took the necessary and quick action to quarantine. With the UK and US riding a kind of false donkey by this point, with all hopes of their political leaders placed on the markets and economy, a quarantine of the country and closing down of the markets went against everything their senses, falsely, told them. They waited too long. Of course, they eventually had to quarantine due to their networked populations talking amongst themselves and figuring out what was really happening. Tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths had already occurred, however. The US and UK populations worked out that their governments were grossly underprepared. The economically centered ideology simply had no way to comprehend what it needed to do. Those governments collapsed. This was the moment the preparers had been waiting for. With the central exponents of evil, and therefore self-destruction, removed, Phase 3 could begin. As millions went into unemployment and hunger due to the economic shutdown from quarantine, more deaths slowly began to take place. Mobilizing and organizing using the internet, populations fought back, taking control of the institutions meant to represent them. Bankers, corporations, and big business saw huge swathes of new regulation being passed in order to temper their power and influence. A similar strategy to that which had been used against the tobacco giants at their height of power 40 or 50 years earlier was utilized. The hereto underreported negative effects of the everything economics ideology circulated in much the same way as the detriment to health from smoking did. While it later was revealed that much of the scientific information around the negative health effects of smoking was untrue and had been doctored purely to reduce the economic power of the tobacco companies, with the everything economics ideology the negative effects really did exist and could be seen by everyone thanks to the internet. Smoking eventually came back into fashion and, while it was never as profitable, was taken up by many more people. During the period of smoking's reintegration, the preparers made contact, for the first time, via coded messages to teachers in essays supposedly written by their students. They began to feed the ideas into the intelligentsia needed for the most important phase of all, Phase 4, the revealing of extraterrestrial intelligent life.